The Alien Empress forced my choice and I picked the daughter they mocked. The Empress's demand. Great throne room of the alien empire was filled with silence so heavy that even the guards did not dare to breathe loudly. Tall stone pillars stretched toward the ceiling, and golden banners with strange symbols hung across the walls. In the center, the throne of the Empress rose higher than any platform. She sat there, draped in silver robes, her crown sharp like the points of a weapon. Her gaze was colder than iron, her eyes glowing like two shards of burning glass. Before her stood the human envoy, a man chosen to represent his people. His heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his back straight. He knew this day would decide not only his fate, but perhaps the fate of his entire world. The Empress had summoned him with no explanation. All he had been told was that he would be tested. Around him, hundreds of alien nobles and generals stood in silence. They were tall and elegant, their skin shades of silver, green, and pale gold. Their laughter was hidden behind faint smirks. They already knew what was about to happen, and they waited to enjoy the human's downfall. The Empress raised her hand, and the hall bent to her command. "Human," she said, her voice echoing across the marble chamber. "Today you will make a choice that will bind you to this empire and to me." The envoy's mouth felt dry. He bowed his head slightly, but his voice was steady. "What is your will, Empress?" Her lips curved into the smallest of smiles, but there was no warmth in it. She raised her other hand, and from the shadows at her side came 5 young women. They stepped into the light, their eyes watching him carefully. Each one was her daughter, the heirs to her throne. Gasps rose from the court. The daughters rarely appeared before the public. Now they stood together, their beauty and presence overwhelming. 4 of them carried themselves with the strength of warriors. Their postures were sharp, their eyes filled with pride. But one stood apart, smaller, weaker, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. The court's whispers sharpened into cruel laughter. The Empress spoke again. "You will choose one, a daughter to stand beside you. Choose wisely, human, for your choice will reflect not only on you, but on your people." The envoy froze. He had not expected this. To choose one of the Alien Empress's daughters was not only strange, it was dangerous. If he insulted her by making the wrong decision, death would be certain. If he hesitated, it would show weakness. The entire court watched him, eyes burning into his skin. He looked at the line of daughters. The first was tall, with armor-like clothing and a face carved from stone. Her reputation as a warrior was known even to humans. She would be a safe choice, but also the most expected. The second had fiery eyes and carried herself with the arrogance of a queen already crowned. She radiated confidence and cruelty. The third was calm, quiet, but her gaze was sharp like a blade hidden in silk. The fourth, almost glowing, looked at him as if she already owned him, and then his eyes rested on the fifth. She was shorter, her shoulders slightly bent. Her hair fell over her face, hiding her uncertain expression. The others looked strong, but she looked fragile. The whispers grew louder. He could hear them mocking her. "That one is useless. She cannot even walk without stumbling. She is a shame to the throne." The envoy felt the weight of the Empress's stare on him. Her eyes demanded a decision. Sweat began to form on his palms. Every second he delayed increased the risk. But something in him shifted. While the court laughed at the weak daughter, while even her own sisters looked at her with disdain, he noticed something no one else cared to see. Behind her lowered eyes there was pain, but also a quiet strength. She had survived their scorn all her life. To endure that was no weakness. He took a slow step forward. The nobles leaned in, waiting for him to choose the strongest. His boots echoed against the marble floor as he walked past the first daughter, then the second, the third, and the fourth. Each time murmurs rose louder. Why would he pass them? What was he doing? Finally, he stopped before the mocked daughter. She lifted her eyes slightly, confusion flashing in them. She expected rejection. She expected him to walk past her too, but he did not. The envoy's voice rang through the throne room. "I choose her." Gasps filled the air, followed by cruel laughter. The nobles erupted in noise, their voices dripping with disbelief. Some clutched their stomachs as they laughed. Others shook their heads in mockery. The daughters themselves smirked, except for the one he had chosen. She stared at him as though she could not believe what she had heard. The Empress did not laugh. Her gaze hardened and the hall fell silent once again. She studied the human, her expression unreadable. Then her eyes shifted to her daughter. the one who had been called a mistake for so long. The silence stretched until it felt like the very walls trembled under its weight. "You choose the one mocked," the Empress said softly. "You choose the weak." Her voice grew sharper. "Very well, human. Your choice is accepted. But know this, your decision will not go untested." The envoy bowed his head slightly, though his heart raced in his chest. Around him, the court whispered with vicious delight. They believed his choice would be the end of him. But he stood tall, meeting the Empress's glare with unbroken resolve. The daughter he had chosen looked at him again, her eyes wide, her lips trembling as if to speak. But she said nothing. The laughter of the court echoed around her, and yet, for the first time, she felt that someone had seen her not as a failure, but as something more. The Empress leaned forward on her throne. "Prepare yourself, human. Your test begins soon," and with those words, the weight of the Empire pressed down upon him, heavy as the crown itself. The mocked daughter. The court's laughter echoed through the massive throne room long after the human had spoken his choice. The sound rolled like thunder, cruel and mocking, bouncing from one pillar to the next. Every noble leaned closer to another, whispering sharp words about how foolish he was, about how blind humans could be. Even some of the guards who usually stood still as statues struggled to hide smirks behind their helmets. The mocked daughter stood frozen. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes wide with disbelief. For years she had lived in the shadow of her sisters, always told she was a failure. When she tried to fight, she lost. When she tried to speak, her voice shook. The servants laughed when she dropped simple objects, and the generals sneered whenever she passed them in the halls. She had learned to keep her head bowed, to move silently like a shadow, and to expect nothing. Now someone had chosen her. Not her mother, not her sisters, not her people. A stranger. A human. The Empress lifted her hand, and at once the laughter died away. Her throne room obeyed her silence as though it were law. She leaned forward, her silver crown glinting in the torchlight, her eyes sharp as blades. "You choose her?" the Empress asked again, her voice calm but deadly. "Yes," the human answered. His voice did not waver. He stood tall, his back straight, his eyes locked on the Empress. "I choose her." The nobles exchanged glances. None dared laugh now, but their faces showed disbelief. The daughters, standing in their proud line, looked at their sister with contempt. The tallest one smirked. The second rolled her eyes, and the others whispered among themselves. The mock daughter lowered her gaze again, afraid of the attention. The Empress's lips curved into a thin smile. "Very well," she said slowly. "Then let your choice be tested." The human did not speak, but he knew this was only the beginning. The Empress clapped her hands once. The sound rang like a command. From behind the throne, servants and guards appeared, carrying long staffs with glowing symbols carved into them. They slammed the staffs into the ground, and the marble floor trembled. A great circular pattern lit up beneath the human and the chosen daughter, glowing lines of gold stretching outward. The air grew heavy, thick with power. The Empress stood, her robe flowing behind her like a river of silver. She stepped down from her throne, each footstep echoing in perfect rhythm. The entire hall bowed as she passed, but her eyes never left the human. "This empire does not accept weakness," she said. "You have chosen the one mocked by her own sisters, the one no one believed in. Perhaps you saw something we did not, or perhaps you are a fool. Now you will prove your choice in the trial of survival." The mocked daughter gasped softly. She had heard of the trial. It was an ancient test used to expose weakness and destroy those who did not belong. Few survived it, even among the strongest. Her heart pounded as she turned her eyes toward the human. Did he know what he had done? The court buzzed with excitement. Nobles whispered eagerly, already betting among themselves on how quickly the human and the weak daughter would die. Some whispered that it would be a lesson to humans for daring to step into alien affairs. Others whispered that it would amuse the Empress to watch her weakest child fail publicly once again. The human placed a hand on his chest and bowed slightly. "I accept your trial," he said. The Empress raised her chin. "Then prepare. Tomorrow at dawn you will enter the arena." Gasps rippled through the court. The arena was a place of blood. It was where soldiers proved themselves, where creatures from distant worlds were released to test courage and strength. To survive even one round was rare. To survive until the end was nearly impossible. The mocked daughter felt her knees weaken. She wanted to speak, to beg, to cry out that she was not ready, that she could not do this. But when her eyes lifted, she saw the human standing firm. His gaze was steady, unshaken, as though he had already accepted the weight of the trial. Something stirred within her chest. For the first time in her life, someone did not laugh when looking at her. For the first time, someone had placed trust in her. The Empress waved her hand. Guards moved forward, separating the chosen daughter from her sisters. They pushed her toward the human, placing her at his side. She stumbled slightly, but the human reached out and steadied her. The court saw this, and more laughter followed. "Look at her," one noble whispered. "She cannot even stand on her own. Tomorrow she will fall first," another said with a cruel smile. The human ignored them. He leaned down slightly, speaking so only she could hear. "Do not fear them," he whispered. "You are stronger than they know." Her breath caught in her throat. No one had ever spoken such words to her, not even in secret. Her sisters only called her weak. Her mother only looked at her with disappointment. But here was this stranger, a human, speaking as though he truly believed she had strength. The Empress turned and walked back to her throne. "Take them to the chambers of preparation," she commanded. The guards moved quickly, surrounding the human and the mocked daughter. As they were led away, the court burst once more into laughter and whispers, mocking, cruel, certain of what would come. Yet beneath all the noise, a silence grew in the mocked daughter's heart. A silence filled not with fear, but with something unfamiliar. Hope. She dared to lift her eyes again as they walked, and for a moment she met the human's gaze. He nodded once, firm, unshaken, and in that simple gesture she felt something she had never felt before: courage. Tomorrow they would enter the trial. Tomorrow the Empire would watch. Tomorrow the daughter they mocked would face the arena, and tomorrow everything might change. The test of loyalty. The dawn came with a blood-red sky. The sun rose slowly over the alien capital, its light cutting across the towers and casting long shadows on the arena. From outside, the structure looked like a giant ring of stone and steel, its walls carved with ancient symbols of war. Inside, the ground was sand and broken stone, stained from centuries of battles. The seats around the arena filled early. Nobles, generals, soldiers, and servants crowded together, eager to watch the human's failure. Their voices mixed into a sea of noise, laughter, and cruel wagers. Some shouted that the human would last only a few breaths. Others said the mocked daughter would fall before she even touched a weapon. High above, in a private balcony, the Empress sat on her throne. Her daughters stood behind her, their eyes sharp. The strongest ones smiled with cruel amusement, waiting to see their sister humiliated again. Only the mocked daughter's place was empty, for she now stood in the sand below. The human stood beside her, his armor plain but solid, a blade at his side. The daughter trembled slightly, her hands shaking as she held a staff that was too heavy for her arms. The crowd roared with laughter at the sight of her. The Empress raised her hand and the noise fell to silence. Her voice rang out across the arena. "Today begins the trial of survival. The human has chosen my weakest daughter. Let his choice be tested. Let them fight, let them endure, and let the Empire see their truth." She dropped her hand. The ground shook. Gates opened on opposite sides of the arena, and dark tunnels yawned like the mouths of beasts. From the shadows came a sound that made even the strongest generals lean forward. Low growls, the scrape of claws against stone. Then, with a burst of dust and roar, the creatures charged into the light. The first was a beast with scales like black iron, its mouth filled with rows of teeth that dripped with venom. Its tail was long and barbed, swinging with deadly weight. Behind it came another, a creature with 6 legs and glowing red eyes, its movements sharp and quick. The crowd erupted in cheers. These were no simple tests. These were monsters used only for those the Empress wished to crush. The mock daughter's knees weakened. She stumbled back, her grip on the staff slipping. The laughter of the crowd grew louder. The human stepped forward, his sword raised. "Stay close to me," he said firmly. She swallowed hard, her fear choking her words. But she nodded. The first beast lunged, its jaws wide enough to swallow them both. The human moved quickly, rolling aside and striking at its side. The blade cut across the scales but did not pierce deep. The beast roared, twisting its head to strike again. The mocked daughter froze, her body locked in terror. The second creature began to circle them, its 6 legs pounding the ground like drums. "Move," the human shouted. His voice cut through her fear. She stumbled forward, her staff clutched tightly. The first beast swung its tail. The human raised his sword, but the impact knocked him back. The crowd cheered loudly, certain he would fall. But then something strange happened. The mock daughter noticed the way the creature's tail slowed before it swung. She saw a small gap between its scales near the base. Her eyes widened. She lifted her staff and shouted, her voice breaking through her fear. There. Strike there! The human followed her words without hesitation. As the beast turned, he darted low, driving his blade into the gap. This time the sword sank deep. The beast howled, its massive body thrashing before crashing onto the sand, lifeless. The arena fell into silence for a moment. The crowd had not expected her to notice. The Empress leaned forward slightly, her sharp eyes fixed on her daughter. The second creature screeched, its glowing eyes narrowing. It leapt at the mocked daughter, claws flashing. She raised her staff instinctively, blocking the strike. The force sent her crashing onto her back, the air torn from her lungs. The crowd roared again, certain she would die. The creature lunged again. The human raced forward, slashing his sword across its face, forcing it back. But the creature was fast, too fast. It darted to the side, circling them again. The daughter struggled to her feet, her chest burning, her hands bleeding from the rough staff. She wanted to give up, to fall down and close her eyes. But when she looked up, she saw the human standing in front of her, his body already marked with blood from the first beast. He did not move away from her. He did not leave her behind. Something sparked inside her. Her fear did not vanish, but it turned into something sharper. Determination. She watched the creature again. The way it circled, the way its legs sank into the sand. She noticed a pattern. Each time it lunged, its second left leg dragged slightly. A weakness, left leg, she shouted, her voice stronger now. Strike when it drags the left leg. The human nodded once. They moved together this time. When the beast lunged again, the human dodged to the side, waiting. As the left leg dragged, the daughter swung her staff with all her strength, smashing it into the leg. The creature stumbled, its movement broken. The human struck with his sword, piercing the creature's chest. It screamed, twisted, and then collapsed in the sand, its glowing eyes fading to darkness. The arena went silent again. The crowd, once full of laughter, now stared in disbelief. The mocked daughter stood, her chest heaving, her staff still clutched in her bloody hands. She had not run. She had not fallen. She had seen what others had not. The human placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. Well done, he said quietly. For a moment she felt taller, stronger. The laughter of the court no longer cut so deep. Above, the Empress watched with unreadable eyes. Her lips did not smile, but there was the faintest flicker of something in her gaze. Curiosity. The trial was not over. More gates would open. More creatures would come. The Empress would not let them survive so easily. But for the first time in her life, the mocked daughter felt that she was not alone. And for the first time, the Empire began to wonder if weakness was not weakness at all. The rise of the outcast. The sand of the arena was stained with blood, and the air was heavy with the stench of beasts. The human and the mocked daughter stood side by side, their chests rising and falling, their bodies marked with cuts and dust. The crowd, which once roared with laughter, had fallen into a restless silence. The first two creatures had fallen, but everyone knew the trial was not over. The Empress leaned forward on her high balcony, her silver crown glinting in the rising sun. Her eyes, sharp and cold, studied her daughter. For years she had been a shadow, the weak one, the mistake. Now she stood in the sand, bruised and bleeding, yet still alive. A flicker of curiosity passed through the Empress's gaze, but her face showed nothing more. The gates at the far end of the arena groaned open again. This time the ground shook harder. A monstrous figure stepped out, towering above the others. Its body was armored with thick plates of bone, its arms ending in claws sharp enough to cut stone. The creature's roar shook the walls. Nobles in the stands leaned forward with eager smiles, ready to watch the human and the weak daughter torn apart. The mocked daughter's hands shook as she gripped her staff. Fear crawled back into her chest, heavier than before. Her body ached, her breath burned, and her mind screamed for her to run. But when she turned her head, she saw the human standing tall, his sword raised, his eyes steady. He had not once looked at her with the scorn she was used to. He met her gaze and nodded. "We fight together," he said. Something inside her shifted. The fear did not vanish, but it no longer controlled her. She remembered how he had trusted her with the first beast, how he had listened when she saw what others missed. For the first time in her life, someone believed in her, and that belief burned brighter than her fear. The beast charged. Its claws tore into the sand, sending shards of stone flying. The human ran forward, striking with his sword, but the blade clanged against its armor without leaving a mark. The monster swung its massive claw, throwing him back across the arena. The crowd erupted in cheers. The mock daughter gasped. She ran toward him, helping him to his feet. He coughed, blood staining his lips, but he grinned faintly. "Not finished yet," he whispered. She looked back at the beast. Her sisters were watching from above, their eyes filled with smug delight. They expected her to fail. They wanted her to fail, and perhaps once she would have. But not today. She forced herself to breathe. She studied the monster. Its armor was thick, but as it moved, she noticed gaps at the joints. The plates shifted slightly when it swung its claws, exposing soft flesh beneath. "There," she said, pointing. "Aim for the joints." The human followed her eyes, then gave a quick nod. They moved together. The beast swung again, but this time they dodged in unison. As its claw came down, the human struck at the exposed gap. The blade cut through, and the monster roared in pain. The daughter swung her staff at its other arm, forcing it to stagger. The crowd gasped. This was not weakness. This was something else. The beast thrashed wildly, smashing into the stone walls, shaking the entire arena. Dust rained down as the nobles cried out in shock. But the mocked daughter stood firm, her staff gripped tightly. She no longer looked like the frightened child they mocked. She looked like a fighter. She shouted again, her voice carrying across the arena. "Its chest. When it roars, the armor lifts." The human charged, his blade ready. The beast let out a deafening roar, and as it did, the plates on its chest spread apart slightly. He plunged his sword deep into the opening, driving it with all his strength. The monster shrieked, stumbling back, blood spilling into the sand. The daughter struck again and again with her staff, forcing it down onto its knees. Together they fought like one. And finally, with a final strike, the beast collapsed onto the arena floor, dead. The arena fell silent. No laughter, no cheers, only shock. The mocked daughter stood panting, her staff dripping with blood, her hair clinging to her face. She looked up at the balcony. For the first time in her life, the nobles were not laughing. For the first time, her sisters' smug smiles were gone. The Empress sat still, her expression unreadable. But her eyes lingered on her daughter longer than ever before. She had expected failure. Instead, she had seen something else, something dangerous. The human placed a hand on the daughter's shoulder. "You see what they cannot," he said softly. "Do not forget that." Her heart raced, but this time it was not only fear. It was something stronger. Pride. The Empress finally rose from her throne. Her voice rang out across the arena. "Impressive," she said coldly. "But the trial is not yet finished. You have survived the beast, but the true test is still to come." Gasps spread through the crowd. What more could there be? What challenge remained? The Empress's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Tomorrow you will face warriors." The mocked daughter's breath caught. Beasts were terrifying, but they acted on instinct. Warriors trained and cruel would not give her any chance. They would aim to humiliate her, to crush her in front of all. The human stood firm, his grip steady on his sword. He did not fear the Empress's words, and the mocked daughter, though fear still whispered in her heart, now carried something stronger. For the first time, she believed she might rise above them all. A choice that changed everything. The night before the final trial, the human and the mocked daughter were placed in a stone chamber beneath the arena. Torches burned dimly along the walls, casting long shadows that flickered with every movement. The air was thick and heavy, carrying the scent of sand and old blood. Above them, the noise of the city faded into silence. The daughter sat quietly against the wall, her staff resting at her side. Her body was bruised, her hands blistered, and her heart heavy with fear. Tomorrow she would face not beasts but warriors, trained killers who lived only for battle. She had seen them fight before. They moved like shadows, fast and merciless. Against them she was nothing. The human cleaned his blade slowly, his hands steady, his face calm. His body too was marked by wounds, but his eyes carried no fear. When he noticed her trembling, he spoke softly. "You are not nothing. You saw what I could not. Twice you saved us. You are stronger than you think." She looked at him, her lips trembling. I'm weak. My sisters are strong, but I was never meant to fight." He shook his head. "Strength is not only in the arm. It is here." He touched his temple. Then he placed his hand gently over her heart. "And here." Her chest tightened. His words broke through the walls she had built over years of humiliation. For so long she had believed the voices that mocked her. But now as she sat with him, she wondered if maybe those voices had been wrong all along. The morning came quickly. The gates of the arena opened once more, and the roar of the crowd thundered across the sand. Nobles, generals, and soldiers filled the stands, their voices rising in cruel excitement. The Empress sat high above, her crown catching the sunlight, her expression sharp and unreadable. This time, no beasts entered the arena. Instead, 6 alien warriors marched onto the sand. They were tall and powerful, armored in dark steel, their weapons gleaming. Each one had fought in wars across the stars, and each one carried the pride of the Empire. They lined up in perfect formation, their eyes burning with the promise of blood. The mock daughter's heart raced. Her knees threatened to give way, but the human's steady presence beside her kept her upright. He raised his sword, his gaze locked on the warriors. "We stand together," he said. The Empress rose from her throne, her voice echoing through the arena. "This is your final test. Survive and your choice will be honored. Fall and your shame will be remembered forever." She raised her hand. The trial began. The warriors moved as one, advancing with deadly precision. The human stepped forward, blocking their first strikes with his sword. The clash of steel rang through the arena, sparks flying. The mock daughter stumbled back, her fear clawing at her. The crowd laughed cruelly. One warrior turned toward her, his blade raised to strike her down quickly. She lifted her staff weakly, barely stopping the blow. The impact knocked her onto the sand, her body screaming with pain. But as the warrior raised his sword again, something inside her snapped. She saw the same faces that had mocked her all her life, the same sneers, the same laughter, and she realized she was tired of it. Tired of being silent, tired of being the shadow. Her eyes sharpened. She rolled aside just as the sword came down, the blade cutting into the sand instead. She swung her staff upward, striking the warrior's knee. He staggered. She struck again, this time at his throat, and he fell to the ground gasping. The crowd gasped with him. The human fought with fierce skill, but he was outnumbered. Blades cut across his arms and shoulders, and blood ran down his side. Still, he did not fall. He trusted her, and she refused to let him down. She watched the warriors closely, her eyes scanning their movements. She noticed small details. The way one favored his right arm, the way another's armor loosened when he lifted his shield. She called out to the human, guiding his strikes. Together they began to turn the fight. One by one, the warriors fell. The crowd, once roaring with laughter, grew silent. The nobles leaned forward, their disbelief growing with every strike. Her sisters watched in shock, their eyes wide, their pride cracking. Finally, only one warrior remained. He was the strongest, his blade heavy, his movements precise. He struck the human hard, knocking him to the ground. The crowd cheered, certain it was the end. The mocked daughter screamed, charging forward. She swung her staff with all her strength, striking the warrior across the face. He stumbled, and in that moment the human rose again, driving his sword through the warrior's chest. The last body fell onto the sand. The arena went silent. The daughter stood panting, her staff dripping with blood. Her hair was wild, her body broken, but her eyes burned with fire. She was no longer the weak one. She was no longer the mistake. The human stood beside her, his sword lowered, his chest heaving. Together they turned toward the balcony. The Empress rose slowly. Her eyes locked on her daughter. For the first time there was no disappointment in them, only something colder, respect, and fear. The court did not laugh. They did not cheer. They only stared at the daughter they had mocked, the daughter who had risen from the shadows and stood victorious in the arena. The Empress's voice rang out across the silence. "So be it, the human's choice is honored. The daughter who was mocked has proven herself." The daughter's heart pounded. She looked at the human, her lips trembling. "You believed in me," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "I only saw what they refused to see." And in that moment she knew his choice had not only changed her life, it had changed everything.